So as we get Jason and Commissioner Lopez and Claudio on, that gets us to 8. So we'll have a quorum. Time is limited today, so I'll call the meeting to order for our January 8th meeting of the advisory panel for the Psychiatric Hospital in South Central Kansas. Thanks for joining today. Happy New Year. Thank you for the accommodation of letting us do this virtually to avoid the travel complications that hopefully don't happen, but were a possibility today. We've just got really one or two main agenda items of looking at the recommendations that we'd like to include in our interim report that's due the first part of next week, and then any other tweaks to the report that you'd like to make. And if we have some time, we'd like to highlight our kind of work plan for the upcoming months, just to give you a sense of what we'd work on month by month, because there's several significant tasks you can see from the recommendations that we need to kind of divide up into chunks. So, but before we jump into that, I'll have you look at the minutes. You've only got minutes for December 11th, so that's all I would ask you to review today. We did meet on the 18th in a brief session, and I've given bad instructions on what to do about the minutes for that, so I need to correct that. But you should have minutes for the our meeting on the 11th. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? There's a lot of people on the screen to watch. If you do have something to add, I think there's a way you can raise your hand or something that would be helpful to me visualize it. But I didn't hear any adjustments to the minutes, corrections. If there aren't, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved by Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Representative Carpenter.
Second.
I'll
by
second.
Jefferson.
Go ahead.
And the sheriff seconded. Any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, they'll stand approved. Now we're going to move into looking at the recommendations and the interim report. Had a couple of days at least to look at the recommendations that we drafted as a kind of a staffing team, and also the full report. And we would like to get approval for whatever recommendations you want to include in the report, put that all together into a package, and then submit it next week on the 15th. I thought maybe first, the part that you haven't seen as much are the recommendations, which were in a separate document that we can include. Maybe go through those first, since some folks have a little bit more of a time limit to get through the recommendations, and then we can see if there are other things you'd want to add or correct or change in the overall report. And so I can participate. Monica is going to lead the kind of facilitation of the review of the recommendations, and I'll put them up on the screen so you can share them, or at least that document, so you can see that document as well.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. Happy snowy day to you, or rainy, depending on where you are. The recommendations are in the format and content is very similar to what was discussed in a couple different meetings, but these are just draft as a starting point for us, and are absolutely open to any changes at all. But the first one listed at the top of your page has to do with the conversation regarding expanding the number of beds. So if there any, I think at this point, if it's okay with all of you, a consensus kind of situation might be okay. I don't know that we have to be a vote up and down on each one of them, but is there any discussion regarding the first one regarding increasing the number of beds if funding became available?
Any discussion about that item? The couple of actions it would take, just for our purposes, KDADS would provide an estimate to the legislature, or to the governor and to the legislature, of what we need in addition to the funding that's appropriated to get to 100 beds, and then the operating cost, and try to get that done before the budget's approved, so it's all part of one package. But that's work for us to do as on behalf of the agency.
Is there any concern with that? Sorry, go ahead.
This is Senator Reddy. So Scott, let's say the budget piece is not approved. Do we stay at 50 then? We just go with what was originally asked, or what do we do if it's not accepted?
We build at least the 50 beds within the budgets that's been appropriated. If for some reason it's going to cost more than we've got appropriated to build the 50 beds, I think we've got to build or go ask for that money as well. That's our commitment as the state to the project. But in terms of the expansion from 50 to 100 beds, if we don't get authorization for that or funding for that, then we would just build the 50 beds as the project was originally described.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any more questions about that first recommendation or suggestions?
Well, nothing. I might, Representative Carpenter here, I might add that we have no idea what the cost is going to be of even the 50 beds at this point in time. We hope that the 40 million will be enough, but I don't have a clue as far as when you're talking about construction costs this day and age. So we may have to go back and do something on that 40 million too.
Representative Carpenter, would you agree in theory on the first one that if there was money and if we knew how much it was, we'd like to have more?
Are you talking about the additional 50 beds?
Mm-hmm.
I will work very hard to make sure that we get the funds for the additional 50 beds.
Yeah, I knew that was an important one to you. So as we look at the recommendation as it goes into the report, are you okay with having it in there without the details of the dollars?
Yeah.
Okay, cool beans. We're all on the same page. Any other discussion regarding recommendation number 1? Okay, we'll move forward and get that cleaned up. The second one is purely technical. It was a timing issue between when the executive order was issued and some calendaring. And in the executive order, it says the date for a final report to them. And we would like to get that corrected to December 30th, if that's okay with the group.
Yeah, maybe I'll just make one other comment about that. So Monica's right with in the drafting of the executive order and the time it took to get it approved. The June 30 was an original date in that discussion somewhere. But as we were working with Greenbush and talking internally about the work that we need to do over the course of this year as a panel and working with the community, talking about legislative changes that would be necessary, we could do that all by the end of June, but it would feel fairly rushed, I think, or it seemed to us it would be rushed and maybe miss out on some important discussions. And also that if the purpose of those recommendations is to make a recommendation to the governor or the legislature, we've got a little more time. The legislature won't be back until January 2025. Even for budget purposes, we'd have a couple of additional months over the summer that we could take advantage of. So we hadn't talked about this one as in the panel before, where we had talked about the 100 beds quite a bit, but that's one it seems like the timing our work would benefit from having a little more time to work on things, not delay, but just additional, take advantage of the time that we have in the cycle. So that's where this recommendation comes from.
Makes a lot of sense, Scott.
Yeah, Representative Carpenter here. So you've heard me say in these meetings before that it's more important that we get it right than we rush things and not do our due diligence and make sure that we get it right. Now, with that, will you remind the committee about the restrictions on the money that we have? I've forgotten what that is. It has to be spent by 2026. You might remind the committee what that is, what the details of that are.
Sure. So the ARPA funds that have been awarded to the county have to be obligated and spent by end of December 2026. So it would be so we don't have a lot of time, but I think we'll move forward on the architectural and engineering design. I mean, that contract's been awarded by the county now. Those timelines will stay in place. So I don't think delaying the recommendations or adding some time to the recommendations impact much of the spending side of it. More, if there are legislative changes that we need or defining the catchment area in statute, that would be for next legislative session in 2025.
Well, I just wanted a refresher on when exactly we had to finish that up.
Yeah, by the end of 2026.
Okay, thank you.
And that doesn't change the timeline of construction, or does it?
Immediately.
I guess I'm just kind of unsure of what all that would do.
It doesn't change the timeline of I'm sorry, Commissioner, the recommendation doesn't change the timeline of construction. No, just our report as a panel.
Are we, and I'm sorry if I'm just not understanding this for some reason right now, but are we not giving a recommendation of location? Would that not be a part of that, or is that separate, or what is our charge with that for this advisory panel?
For the location, you're saying we, because I'm part of the panel too, we've already provided direction or some recommendation on location and the process to get there. And so that the location will all be decided well before this deadline would pass, either in June or December. We'll be, well, I don't know, well on the way, but we'll be on the way to design and being ready to start construction, probably before the final report would be issued. This is really more about our charge runs out through the end of, as a panel, goes until March 31st, 2025. So it just seemed like we were missing several months worth of work that we could do by having the final report date set in June of this year.
So this recommendation is specific to changing the executive order itself, only on one area, the due date of the final report. Is that correct, Scott?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions on this or any concerns about this?
I think it makes sense.
Not hearing anything more? Appreciate the clarification on this. This is really, truly a technical one. All right, the next two are regarding the subcommittees or subpanels. As the group has been talking, there's lots of content that needs more attention. Additionally, in the charge from the executive order, there was a specific piece to workforce. So I would like to point out that the next two paragraphs, the one starting with the panel and the panel, the first one is specific to a sub-panel that would meet a couple times that is really, really looking at issues of workforce. The second one is specific to law enforcement agencies and the court system. We just have realized that there should be a third one in there that is specific to collaboration among agencies. It's kind of implied in the first paragraph, but what this recommendation is simply to say these are the mechanics of how we're going to get down to content and recommendations from those content in the three areas of workforce. And I'm gonna give you the exact words here. Coordination across service providers, coordination across law enforcement agencies, and workforce development. So that is what the two paragraphs that Scott had highlighted are about. And we would like to add one that also includes the coordination among agencies. So kind of a logistics kind of issue, but getting to the directive of content.
Monica and Scott, I'm just wondering on bullet number 2, if the CMHC should be in that conversation at all, since we do the screening for those state hospitals at some point, wrapping them in.
Under the law enforcement.
Uh-huh.
Yep, thank you for that. We can make that change.
So when you say sub-panel, it doesn't necessarily have to be people that are on this committee. It can be
Correct.
anybody from the
Bringing in
outside that are.
friends, right, Senator, bringing in some friends, some content experts, some folks that are out in the field currently, but doing it in an organized fashion during the spring, to bring back that almost like a study group.
And on that, should we use CMHCs or should we now use
CCVHC, yeah.
Because pretty much the CMHCs are done.
The fiscal entity, I believe, is still a CMHC, and then the accredited status, I believe, is a CCBHC, but I could be wrong on that. But we can for sure clean that up. We know that the one serving Sedgwick County has CCBHC status, so absolutely, absolutely. But probably need to be looking at surrounding areas. Are there any other thoughts or questions? Knowing that we'll add a sentence or two regarding the coordination across agencies.
Just one more piece of context, because I wrote all of these. So as I was going through the recommendations, I think what's expected is you're recommending somebody do something. And so the first two are the first one was pretty easy, that we recommend that the governor legislature look at funding the 50 additional beds. Then once we got into the other things we've talked about working on, like the subpanels and talking about privatization and catchment area, that's really recommendation directing action to us as the panel, which didn't fit. So this is meant to capture kind of what our work plan is for next year and put that in the report so people can see it. So it's recommendation is a little bit of a ham-fisted way to describe that, but it's still meant to kind of set up an expectation of things that we would work on. So, and it wasn't meant to exclude anybody from any of these subpanels in terms of activity, but trying to highlight, I guess, what came to mind first, which isn't perfect, but we can certainly add or subtract.
Hey, Monica and Scott, just one other thing, maybe with that first paragraph, maybe it's implied, but having some participation from community providers. I think it
Yes.
might be implied, but might be good to at least state.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And then just as kind of a, when you plan a meeting, you kind of try to get things in order, but also included as the last attachment, I believe, in your agenda today was just a proposed set of meeting plans for the next several months. You'll see that they collide and coincide with this discussion also. So as we go to plan those meetings, we're going to need to be reaching out to you to say, who is it that we need to make sure is included in the conversation. So thanks for that. Anything else as it relates to the subcommittees? Okay, seeing none, the next one has to do specifically with attachment. We know that's an important topic to folks. And so this one goes in by itself. Unless you'd like to do it another way. Okay, hearing
I
none.
did kind of, well, so I
Sorry.
don't know why I have a comment about it. So then I wrote them. I did try to the coordination with other community agencies and partners. That was sort of, I thought, part and parcel of the catchment area discussion. But I agree with what Monica said. We probably need to call that out as a separate subpanel and give that subpanel a charge to work on a catchment area. So it's, I mean, I think we'll all have thoughts about it, but in terms of getting the work started, that could be a subpanel
it'll be an important topic. We know it's important to people and we'll get it done. But it's going to take a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
And I would just add CCBHC there again, Monica.
Thank you. Okay, then we get to the very bottom of the page regarding operating models. So knowing that this is, going to take a minute, but we want to call out that this is an important topic for the group and that it will be looked at in the near future. This is where, lots of things can come into play, staffing, ratios, programming, there's a lot there, but we wanted to make sure that we called it out separately.
Yeah, I think this is good that this is Senator Reddy. I think it's good that you put it separately because I think when we look at privatization, there's so many areas of privatization. So I am looking forward to seeing the costs, the outcomes, and staffing, because when we look at the workforce piece, this kind of plays into that, and they're going to be very interconnected. But it also depends on getting positive outcomes and making sure we are, the reason we're building the hospital, the needs are met with whichever staffing, privatization or public, however that might look. So I think we just need a lot more data, and I like the way this is, the paragraph was written up on that.
Any other comments regarding this chunk that has to do with operating models? Okay, thanks for your input on that. And then that takes us to the last one, which was statutory changes. So this, Scott crafted this after our discussion, I believe maybe 2 meetings ago, where, the reality of the timing comes in. I believe maybe Tim, or no, I don't remember who brought this up before, but if there is something that needs to be changed during this legislative session, that will have a positive impact on this project, that's where it lives here. So I believe the example that was given was, well, is there something in Behavioral Science Regulatory Board regulations that could be changed fairly easily without any negative impact that would have a positive impact on our workforce conversation? That was an example of that, and that is what is reflected in the final paragraph on your screen.
I'm good with it.
I think this is a nice little catch-all. If somebody finds something that could be addressed right now.
Well, then we should put 2024 and 2025. So if we did come up with something in the next 89 days, well, 60 days or so, we could put it in front of this session, but we'd really target things for the next legislative session in 2025.
And, that was my interpretation of 2024. So if you all are more comfortable with just 2025, as it was originally proposed, totally open for conversation.
I think we need to include this year as well, as Scott has stated, just in case something that comes up in the next 30 days, and we can get it enacted this year.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Or at
great.
least start the conversation.
Yes. Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move forward on that. So that is the rough draft of ideas that got thrown on a piece of paper. Are there any additional recommendations to be discussed that any of you have that are not reflected?
I think you did a good job capturing it.
Scott did, for sure. And we put we went back through all the notes, and that seemed to be the crux of it. All right, what will happen now is these recommendations will just get edited a bit. We'll clean up a few parts and pieces, and then they will go into the report, which Scott will cover here in a minute.
Hey,
Thanks
Monica,
everybody for your input.
Can I just ask a quick question regarding that executive order date move from June to December 30th?
Sure.
Is there anything that moving that back could pose a challenge to us if various sites have something unforeseen related to them that puts us at a deadline challenge down the road and might have to consider a alternative? Or are we confident enough that with the 4 vetted, that there isn't really anything from either zoning or some environmental concern that has not been studied yet, that adjusting these dates backwards will create some hardship down the road that we can't overcome? Just throwing it out there.
Great question. Great question. Scott, I see this as just the report itself, and that the window for communication back to the legislature and to the governor's office are wide open. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. That this is really more for the final report, or what we'd write down. If we have other advice to provide or recommendations to provide, we can do that along the way as well, and we'd capture those in the final report. But actually, Claudio, I'd argue by giving us a little more room where we can make formal recommendations, that probably helps in case something like that comes up. But if where we might need to make a different recommendation or point somewhere else, but yeah, I think it's probably, I don't know. I wrote it, so I'm biased. I'll just put that out there too, I guess. So, but in case we needed the runway or we needed some more time, this would give us a formal reporting deadline that doesn't exist today beyond the 30th of June, 2024.
Yeah, and if we don't need that much time, we don't care, I mean, if we finish early and everybody's happy with it, who knows?
I think that's fair.
Yeah. All right, we will get those put together for you. And then Scott, did you want me to just do the rest of the report then?
Yes, please. If people have thoughts about that, I can
Great.
bring it up, but it's a lot of pages, so that may not be the most efficient way to go through the report.
Yeah, you got it. You received, so as you know, on panels like this and committees, one of the work products, the deliverables, are a report. Usually there's an interim and then there's a final. That's what this is. It's meant to be the public record for activities, and also a summary and a synopsis of the work thus far. You've seen this will be there. You saw it last month. You received the draft from Scott last week. Just to point out, because I'm sure everybody just did every single word of it, because it is just enthralling, right? The only changes from last time when we were together is that we've added information from the town hall meeting, which appears as Appendix B in the document that you received this morning. There's a breakdown of the town hall meeting and the extended survey that was on the Sedgwick County website for a few days. Other changes since you saw it last time are some editings and cleanup on important things like verb tense. And we also added information specific to how many bids were received. So this document will have the addition of the recommendations. So if you're flipping through on your attachment, the recommendations page is there and empty. We will clean up the recommendations and insert them and then make it a final copy, unless there are any changes, little, big, in between, that all of you would like to see. And we're happy to hear about those right now.
So I do, this is Jeff Easter, have a question. And I know, Scott, you and I had a small discussion on this a while back. So I guess my question is on location. I know from the board meetings that we had, I took it from almost everybody in the room that the recommendation would be the place down south. Now, what has been presented to the governor's office is the place down south and the old Riverside Hospital. Is that correct?
We presented or shared with the governor's office the shortlisted properties. So there were three sites in the one building, the Riverside Hospital building. So we provided pretty much the package you got on the three other sites and the building.
Okay, so all four of those was presented to the governor's office. Was there any indication of what this board was recommending as the one location, or is that up to the governor's office now? Since those are the 4 places that were identified, it's up to the governor's office to pick one.
Well, I've shared what this group recommended, which was either the MacArthur Meridian site, and then the Riverside Hospital was kind of a second choice. I also shared the discussions I was included in with the county commission and the direction they were going with the governor's office. So I think I've passed all of that along. There are some other issues the governor's office is looking into to complete their due diligence before I go ahead from the governor on which site to I guess approve is as clear as anything, or where to ask the county commission to give permission to pursue the purchase process, or to continue the purchasing process.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that us as the advisory panel, there's nothing else expected from us on those recommendations. It's been given to the governor's office, and the governor's office and you guys or the state or whatever will be the ones to pick out of those 4, correct?
Yes, yes. Short answer is yes.
Okay, all right. Thank
And-
you.
Can
And
I
sh-
ask another question with that too? I'm sorry.
Good.
What happens if the county commission wants one location and then the state says they want something else? Because at the end of the day, the commission, as far as I know, and maybe I have this wrong, but we have to vote to approve this. So if there's a conflict there, then how do we work that out? Since the county is receiving these funds and we are building this project, if the commission doesn't approve what the state is saying, what do we do if there's a conflict between the two?
What the MOU would describe is we come to consensus, and if as close as we can, if the state doesn't agree with the decision that the county arrives at, then the state can override that decision. I think what that then would create is a problem in the MOU as being a governing document in the relationship, because I don't think it would make sense if the county's not comfortable with the location to have you build something on a property that you don't want to purchase or wouldn't purchase. So we'd have to rework some of the relationship, particularly that document, because I don't think we could hold you to it. I don't think the state would want to hold you to it, or have you build on something where there'd be that level of disagreement.
Well, Representative Carpenter here, and that's kind of why I've stayed out of this recommendation deal, is because I think ultimately the county commissioners are going to be the ones that deal with the not in my backyard and the location and all that kind of stuff. But I will say the only thing that I'm involved and why I'm involved in it, the location, is that the expense of say remodeling the Riverside Hospital type of deal. And I just think that may blow our project completely out of the water as far as just the expense. And then what are we going to do with the others floors of that building? That is just a can of worms that I'm not sure the state has any business having a building that has arguably 2 or 3 more floors that are just vacant sitting there that we're responsible for. So as far as the location goes, that's only where I come in at, is I just don't know that that's a good fit. I know that remodeling for these kind of mental health hospitals is extremely expensive, ligature resist, all of that kind of stuff, line of sight. I mean, I just can't even imagine that even being in the ballpark as far as the money that we have to operate on.
Sheriff Easter, if I could address, it does seem odd, right? That we're providing a recommendation report and it doesn't specify the location. It is, in my looking at this, it's a timing issue, right? This is due, but there's still some due diligence needed. And the timing is just kind of off. But for this particular report, that not having a location in it yet, does seem like, we're almost there, but we're not quite, but we're just up against a deadline of getting this to the legislature. So I don't know if that helps or hurts in the conversation, but my observation.
Yeah, I mean, my only thing is almost all the time we spent in the meetings was getting educated on RFPs, locations, those type of things. And then, so that's all we really pretty much worked on. And I'm just trying to figure out the process of who actually makes the selection. And I obviously Commissioner Lopez, asked her question. And I mean, the first thing that needs to happen is, before any of the rest of this stuff happens, is we got to pick a location, because this has to be filled by December 2026. And so we are on a very tight timeline on this.
Yep.
And we all know kind of how government works. And I just don't want our panel being put in a position, if we were supposed to make a specific recommendation, let's get this done and move forward, and it doesn't happen. I don't want this panel to get blamed because it's not happening quick enough, if that's what our charge is. Sounds like that's not really our charge. We've made the recommendations, as Scott pointed out, and it's up to the commission and the governor's office or KDADS to figure out what's the best location. So.
Well, and if I recall correctly, for a point of clarity from my perspective, is we were just asked our opinion, and we never settled on a single location as a group. We talked about the fact that we didn't think the hospital was a wise choice because of the cost and the size and the scope of the building, but I remember us ruling out a couple places, but I don't remember us landing on anything specific anyway in that meeting.
So I have one more question. I guess, are we still on track? Because we've been pretty public saying that we're going to have a location decided on, and the public will know where we're going by the end of this month. And I mean, I hear what you're saying, Joan, and I understand, but it did sound like at least the majority spoke in favor of a location. So if there's a conflict, or if we're waiting for the state to hear where you guys are saying that needs to happen, are we still going to meet the timelines that we've told the public? Because again, like has already been stated, the commission, I feel like we're ready to go ahead, but we're waiting. And if anyone's going to be upset if we don't meet that, it's going to be towards the commission. And so I just want to make sure that I'm pushing as much as we can that we stay with what we told the public, and that would be by the end of the month, we would have something in that arena done.
I've shared that timeline up my reporting chain to the governor, so they're aware of it. They have, as far as I know, all the information, at least they've asked me for and my team for. So I don't have any reason to think we wouldn't be able to hit the timeline, because a lot in that RFP, which was a really smart thing for the county to include, was, to have a closing date by the end of January. That the closer we get to that date, the harder it is to hit. But I mean, that's clearly the expectation. So and I've made that as clear as I can. And again, I'm not in a position that I can commit, but I don't know of additional information that I need to provide to the governor's office to get to the point of a decision.
And then Tanya, can I ask you a question in regards to this? Depending on when we hear back from the state on where they're at, how long is it going to take, do you think, to do the negotiations to be able to finalize a contract? Because if we, I mean, we'll still have to have some time this month to be able to do that piece of it too.
I think probably realistically, we'd want about 30 to 45 days to be able to negotiate and close on the property and do our due diligence. Did you hear me, Commissioner Lopez?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not, well, if we're gonna, I'm waiting on basically a green light from Scott to get something on a commission agenda. Because the first step of this operationally is to have the commission basically vote for a location. And then as Scott mentioned before, state has, I guess, in the best term, they have veto power. The location goes where they say. But we have to get something in front of commission. And if I'm hearing you correctly, Tanya, we're on January 8th, and we can have a special meeting anytime during the month. We're not hemmed into meeting dates. This is a priority for the commission. So we can have a special meeting on any day to do this. But if you're saying 30 to 45 days, then we already can't hit a closing by what you just stated.
Right.
So what happens if we can't hit a closing by January 31?
Well, then we're into February and you start moving your timeline further back.
And that's okay, right? If that's the will of the state, if that's the will of.
What happens is then you start having to condense your design time and then hope your construction timeline can be condensed even more, or we go past our construction timeline in past, 2026. And then possibly what could happen is the state then has to come in and maybe use some of their funding if ARPA can't come in and we can't fulfill all the ARPA funds. So that's why timelines are of the essence when we put these timelines together.
But I think aren't there two different, Representative Carpenter here, aren't there two different issues? Just by the end of January is the site selection. And then 30 to 45 days after that will be the contract and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure why.
When we were going to the commission in January, we wanted to be able to close by the end of January. So we went to the commission with executive session in December to hopefully have a site selected. We weren't able to do that. So now we're just prolonging that December date into January. And the further that we push that behind, we were hoping to have 30 days in January to close on the site end of January and then be able to move forward with design. We're not able to do that now. So we're just pushing back a 30-day timeline.
Okay.
Yeah, and all the places that Tanya mentioned, we could try to make up time in either design or construction or in the awarding of a construction contract. I mean, we'll try, but she's also right. If we get past the ARPA deadlines for spending, if there's more expense beyond the end of that time frame and we can't use the ARPA funds, the state's not going to leave an incomplete building, whatever that phase is. We'll have to true that up at the end of the project.
But don't those funds just have to be obligated? They don't have to be spent?
They have to be obligated by the end of 2024. They have to be spent by the end of 2026.
Okay, exactly. So I don't see any problem with that. I mean, and then you're talking about a year at the very least, a year, 2025 to build it.
Well, I mean, you're talking about 24 to probably 26 months maybe to build, and you're talking about 6 months to design.
So I think everybody agrees we're tight here, right? Everybody for a different reason here. As it relates to this report, is there, do you want something in here, or are you okay with the way it is now? To at least get this off of our checklist. Totally open. This was just our first draft at it. Or our last draft, or close to last.
I looked to Scott on that. I mean, when I read the draft advisory panel recommendations, I thought it was conspicuously absent that we didn't have something more on site, but I'll defer to Scott on that. If he's had discussion with the governor's office, we need to move on the location because we can't get exact costs and some of the other things that this committee is asking for until we get a site. And that seems to be and I agree with Will, I agree with Representative Carpenter. We want to do it right from the get-go and tap the brakes if we have to, but we have to keep it moving and at least get a site selected ASAP. And then there's a lot of discussion after that, how it's built and designed and operationalized. That's things that can take some time, but we have to get a geographic site picked. I didn't answer your question, did I, Monica? It's up to Scott whether.
I think you did. I think you did. You said it's up to Scott, which is okay
Yeah.
with us.
Well, so so in all honesty, I kind of thought anyway, it doesn't matter what I thought. We could put a recommendation in the report that's going to be delivered on next Monday or Sunday night, saying, the panel recommends the governor make indicate to the Board of County Commissioners the desired site based on the 4 options that were presented, and then that would be in something she would get on Monday or Tuesday of next week. I hope we know before that, so that recommendation wouldn't be needed. But given where we are, if the panel would like us to take a stab at drafting a recommendation like that to include in the report, be happy to do that, circulate it by email, and folks can weigh in about that language.
So you're saying our recommendation would be for her to tell us, are we not going to include what a recommendation from this panel would choose on where to put that? I mean, would that not be a piece of that as well?
Well, it could be. I think we're narrowed to of the 4 shortlisted sites. I think we would have to look back at the minutes of the panel's discussion, but I think we leaned towards, had reservations about the Riverside Hospital building, some reservations about other sites, and had recommendations about maybe 1 or 2 of them that would be good sites. So be more saying the panels provided this feedback on the sites and would request that the governor make a decision. We could say no later than, and the commission's going to meet again on the 18th. So, I mean, that wouldn't, I don't want to say soon as possible. We could put a hard date on it to try to trigger a response.
Yeah, this is Mary. I mean, I think that we're all sort of grappling with that same thing, which is that we do have some opinions and have made some recommendations as it relates to remodeling versus construction, and have those been articulated with the 4 site selections?
Yes. But particularly about remodeling costs
Okay.
for the Riverside Hospital building.
Well, I would be in support then of adding time-wise that recommendation coming back so that the county commissioners could move forward.
So, Scott, we can work together to get an additional recommendation to add in and get that sent back out to everybody. Are there any other changes to the report or anything that was, as somebody said, glaringly missing?
Well, back to what we were talking about, I would make a motion that we include that the governor's office respond to us by the 18th of January on a location.
Second that.
Motion and a second on that. Just for clarity, is that a motion to include that as a recommendation in the report, or a separate action outside the report, outside of our interim report?
I think it would be a separate action, actually.
Okay.
Something that you could communicate to the governor's office. I'll be happy to also call Will Lawrence and visit about that also. But I do think that it's important. And how long can it take? That's 10 days. You could put a map up on the deal and throw darts at it. And
So
the county had a much more
Representative, when
deliberate
you say-
process than that, Representative, but I understand the point.
Representative Carpenter, when you say a report or a decision made back to us, would it be more prudent that the governor's office isn't necessarily giving us, the panel, because we're making our recommendations, and the governor's office really doesn't answer to this panel, we kind of answer to her, but more so that a decision is made and it communicated to the county commissioners, because they're the ones that are going to have to take a vote on whether that's the location they want or not. Would that
Sure.
a better way to approach it, or do you just want to include them and BOC, or us and BOCC?
Yeah, I don't know. We're kind of in a gray area. I don't know what's going to happen if the governor selects a site, quite frankly, that the county commission's not comfortable with. That's something that I'm not sure what we'll do about that. Hopefully it would be a site that everybody could agree on at that point in time. But I think it's important that we do, like everyone has said, that we do have a site.
I think we have to ask for a deadline for obvious reasons through this conversation, and for us on the panel, yeah, okay, you've let us know, but I think it's most important that BOCC is the ones that are getting that information as quickly as possible, so they can make it a decision as well.
Well, and I could amend my motion to include that they know that the governor's office notifies the Sedgwick County Commission
Okay.
by that date.
I would second if that's the motion that's being made, that BOCC gets notified.
Well, we can see, Tom, you are the second. Do you agree to modify your second as well to correspond with?
I would modify the second, yes.
So we've got a motion and a second. Melinda from my team has tried to transcribe what the motion was, so I'm going to restate it, and Representative Carpenter and Tom, let me know if this is close. Panel recommends that the governor make a decision by January 18th on the selection of a site for the State Psychiatric Hospital to the and communicate that to the Sedgwick County Board of County Commissioners, considering the public input that's been provided.
Correct.
Something along those lines.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Tom, is the 18th the right date if that's the next BOCC meeting where it could be discussed?
Well, the normal Wednesday meeting is the 17th. The 18th is fine because it sets us up for the 24th meeting.
Okay,
As I said before, we can do a special meeting anytime the commissioners want to, and it's a big enough deal where the commissioners may choose to have a special meeting, for example, on the 19th, the day after, to do this. It's that important to them, so not too
Okay.
worried about that.
Yes, the 18th is 10 days from today, if you want to think of it that way. But that's
And-
the general outlines of the motion. It's been moved and seconded. Monica, any other
I'm
discussion?
just confirming that this is a separate motion for a second recommendation of action not to be included in the report.
Right, because I just don't think
Thanks.
it won't be relevant by the time.
Right. Thank you. I was just confirming. Thanks for letting me clarify that.
Would anybody like to hear the motion again? It may be slightly different the second time it's repeated because as I'm reading the notes, but you've got the general outline of it. Would anybody like to hear the motion again? Not hearing any, so there's been a motion and a second to have the panel communicated by the chair to the governor's office to ask the governor to make a decision by January 18th on site selection and communicate that back to us and the Board of County Commissioners, Sedgwick County Board of County Commissioners. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Hearing none, the motion's approved.
And Scott, just for the minutes and the notes, do we need a motion to accept the interim report as edited?
We do. If there aren't any other changes to the interim report, with the exception of, we'll take the recommendations that we talked about and insert those into the document that you've all seen. But other than that, is there a motion to approve the interim report?
So moved.
Second,
Claudio made a motion
Mary,
There's-
second.
and Mary Jones seconded. Any discussion about approving the report? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we've got an interim report with a little more work to do on our side. Those are the main two items that we had to go through today. Thank you for your work and effort and consultation about that. Monica.
One little quick thing. Thanks to everybody who has filled out the subcommittee survey. I know we heard from 7 of you. If you haven't had a chance to do that, it was in your email today, and it's also included in the chat. For the 3, if you would be willing to spend some time in the month of April on the work groups. Thanks, Scott.
So you're welcome. So the other part in it was a document that was in the materials about the kind of plan for the spring. Next month, we'll focus on workforce with some of that first effort. March would be to talk about privatization and some options around what that would look like. And then as we were thinking through it, we might just take the month of April and use that just for sub-panel work and not have a full panel meeting depending on where we are, but just sort of dedicate a month's worth of, not the full month, but our meeting time to the sub-panels meeting. So that would be our kind of schedule going forward. You can take a look at that. If you have thoughts, just let us know. And also in that survey is we still need to find a meeting time and date for future meetings given the legislative session. The first few responses that we got back indicated the third Friday was Fridays are a good day. Third Friday seemed okay. The afternoon's not going to work for one of the panel members, so we may have to look at the morning. But if you could weigh in on the meeting time, that would be helpful as well as we work on the schedule for 2024. Any other items of business or discussion items for today? I don't hear anything. Thank you all for your work today. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Sheriff Easter moves second,
I'll second. It's Jason.
and Jason, thank you for seconding the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we're adjourned for today. Thank you for the expedited work and your focused attention. Everybody be safe as we go through this next little weather event.